The term super team was thrown around a lot throughout the 2010s. In the first part of the decade, the Miami Heat, led by LeBron James, took over the first part, and in the second part, the Kevin Durant Warriors were dominant. But what do those teams have in common? They were both dismantled by Kawhi Leonard. And in today's video, we're gonna be determining who would win between these two dynasty-killing teams, that being the 2014 San Antonio Spurs and the 2019 Toronto Raptors. But first, let me give you guys a brief history lesson on the 2014 San Antonio Spurs and the 2019 Toronto Raptors. The 2014 San Antonio Spurs. But before we get into the year of 2014, let's take it back to June of 2013. With 20 seconds left, the Spurs were up by 3 points in Miami to secure another championship in the Tim Duncan era. But when all things were going right for San Antonio, everything went to shit really quickly.
Out to Allen, his three-pointer, bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining. Spurs do not have a timeout, but the officials are going to review to see if Allen was behind.
After that shot, San Antonio lost Game 6 in overtime, and they lost Game 7 at home to stop the Spurs from winning their 5th championship. And now in 2013 offseason, the Spurs find themselves in a weird predicament, in the sense of, do they make any drastic moves to the roster, or do they stay put and hope that the big three of Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili can hold out for one more year for one last hurrah? While the other teams around the league started to get better, like the Houston Rockets acquiring Dwight Howard, Doc Rivers is now coaching the Lob City Clippers, and this was before Doc Rivers started getting a bad reputation as a coach, and Andre Iguodala was traded to the Golden State Warriors, and last but not least, the New Orleans Pelicans acquired Tyreke Evans and Drew Holiday. So the real question is, can the Spurs afford to remain complacent? With the emergence of Kawhi Leonard in the previous season, all San Antonio did was sign Marco Bellinelli, knowing that they were only one rebound away from being champs once again. They prayed that Tim Duncan, now in year 17, won't regress too much compared to the previous season, where he put up 18 points per game, 10 rebounds, 2.7 blocks, shooting 50% from the field. It wasn't only Tim Duncan the Spurs were concerned about. They were also concerned about Tony Parker going into year 13. In the previous season, he was top 5 in MVP conversations before he hurt his ankle in March, putting up averages of 16.7 points per game, 5.7 assists, with 50% from the field and 37% from 3. It was going to be a worry to see if Tony Parker can recover from an ankle injury and not regress. And finally, Manu Ginobili, going into year 11, and shrinking in one of the most important games of his career, being in Game 6 against the Miami Heat, where he put up 9 points per game, 2 of 5 from the field, with 8 turnovers. The Spurs went into the 2013-2014 season with high hopes for their big three and Kawhi Leonard, even though they weren't the favorites to win it all, because like I said before, the teams around them got better and the Miami Heat still exist. All the Spurs did was essentially just get older. I've talked about the stars of this team, but let's really get into the nitty-gritty of the Spurs roster. Marco Bellinelli being the only offseason acquisition. He was an elite shooter and off-ball player. Matt Bonner was ahead of his time, being a stretch 4, being able to shoot 40% from 3, and Boris Diaw, who was a perfect plug-and-play role player, who didn't really excel at anything on the offensive end, and was a good defender on the defensive end, while still being able to put the ball on the floor and create for himself, which was rare for a guy of his size at the time. And one of the greatest role players of all time, being the perfect 3-and-D guard, being able to match up against guards and forwards, and still be able to shoot at a 40% clip, and Danny Green, and Patty Mills, also being a good shot creator off the bench, and another 40% shooter on the team, and the perfect center to put alongside Tim Duncan, being Thiago Splitter, who was able to do all the dirty work. A lot of people counted out the Spurs dynasty because they weren't known as a team to go back-to-back in the NBA Finals, and 2013 being Tim Duncan's only finals loss, no one knew what to expect. And to start the year, the Spurs in their first 20 games were 16-4, going on an 11-game win streak in the process, and the team looked hungry to get back to the NBA Finals. And by the end of the season, they ended up with a record of 62-20, which was the best record not only in the West, but in the entire league. being 7th in offensive rating with 110.5 and 3rd in defensive rating with 102.4, and their best lineup being Tony Parker, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, Boris Diaw, and Tim Duncan, who had an offensive rating of 117.2, compared to the league highest that year being the Los Angeles Clippers with 112.1, and their defensive rating being 86.7, which would have been number 1 in the league that year, compared to the actual number 1 being the Indiana Pacers with a 99.3. Going into round 1 of the NBA playoffs that year, they were the overwhelming favorites to beat the 8th seeded Dallas Mavericks. Led by the aging Dirk Nowitzki and Monte Ellis, with the aging Vince Carter by their side, the Spurs should hypothetically handle the Mavericks in less than 6 games. Game 1 starts, and even with Dirk and Monte having terrible games with a combined total of 8 for 28 from the field, it was still enough to keep the game close, but wasn't close enough, losing game 1 90-85. And now going into game 2, the Mavs knew not to go down 2-0 to the Spurs, so they came out swinging, and swung they did, winning the game by 21 points to even out the series, going to Dallas. The game was a close game throughout, with Monte Ellis being the leading scorer and Dirk Nowitzki being their franchise player, down 2 with 1.7 seconds left. Who do you think got the ball? It sure wasn't either of those guys. The answer would be none other than half man, half amazing Vince Carter.
What kind of look is it going to be? It comes in the corner for the win. Yes! Yes! Do you believe it?
And with that shot, the Dallas Mavericks took a 2-1 lead on the San Antonio Spurs going into game 4. And what could go wrong? And with another close game, down by 2, 10 seconds left, Monte Ellis with the ball to tie the game. Fate of the Mavericks in his hands. He misses the game-tying layup, and that evens out the series 2-2, going back to San Antonio. And in game 5, even with Vince Carter turning back the clock, scoring 28 points, it still wasn't enough because the Spurs used the power of teamwork to secure game 5. And in game 6, the Mavs were up by 6 with 20 seconds to go. And even with the Spurs making a comeback, hitting back-to-back threes, the Mavs still held them off. We all saw the shenanigans Popovich was trying to pull off, having 6 people on the court at the end of the game. Nonetheless, there's now a game 7, going back to San Antonio. The Spurs said enough was enough. They got sick and tired of Dallas Mavericks shit. The Spurs put belt to ass, winning game 7 by 23 points. And this is the game the Spurs finally snapped. They locked in for the remainder of the playoffs, only losing 4 more games for the rest of the playoffs. And one of those games being against the Portland Trailblazers, led by LaMarcus Aldridge and a sophomore Damian Lillard, and a rookie CJ McCollum, in which they handled easily in 5 games. And now in the conference finals, to match up with the biggest competition yet, being the young and hungry Thunder team who made the finals 2 years previously. Led by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, they possessed the biggest threat to the Spurs, but still that wasn't enough, even with the series being close. And in game 6, with 7 seconds left, down by 4, Westbrook takes a ridiculous 3 to end all the Thunder's chances to secure the Spurs ticket to the NBA Finals. And now, the long-awaited rematch is here. The Miami Heatles and the San Antonio Spurs. I was going to try to add some type of build-up, some type of suspense, to make this series not seem as bad as it was. But goddamn, this series was terrible. Because outside of game 2, which was the only close game, and the Spurs actually ended up losing that game, they beat the Miami Heat 4-1, with an average margin of victory being 18. They put belt to ass, the last remaining hope LeBron had in winning a championship in Miami, to close out the Spurs playoff run with 16-7, and 3 of those losses being in the first round. The 2019 Raptors had an interesting offseason. After the Raptors got dismantled by a singular man named LeBron Raymond James, again and again and again, they knew that their championship window is now open after the boogeyman went west. They needed to capitalize on the opportunity, and the disgruntled star out in San Antonio was there for the taking. Even though he was vocal about going to LA, where he was from, and he wanted to go home and play, San Antonio did not care. They told teams to send their best packages and anyone could have him. Masai Ujiri picked up the phone and offered their franchise player, who put his blood, sweat, and tears into this franchise, which was DeMar DeRozan. The Spurs agreed, and the full package for the trade was: the Spurs traded Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green to Toronto for DeMar DeRozan and Jakob Poeltl and a first-round pick. Kawhi Leonard is now a Raptor. Raptors fans don't know what to expect out of him. Coming off an injury-riddled 2017-2018 season, playing only 9 games, with a lot of controversy surrounding Kawhi Leonard that season, most people thought because it was a contract year and he wanted to go to LA, he was just going to coast through the year and load manage. But boy, were we wrong. And well, to start the year, in their first 25 games, the Raptors were 20-5, with Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard leading the charge. Even with their great start, Masai decided, you know what, we're still not good enough. We need to upgrade at the center position. But what did they do? They traded away Valanciunas for a former Defensive Player of the Year, multiple-time All-Star, multiple-time All-NBA defensive team, and Marc Gasol. So now their defensive starting 5 would be, at their point guard position, a multiple-time All-Star, one of the greatest players to draw charges in NBA history, and Kyle Lowry, and their shooting guard, one of the greatest 3-and-D role players of all time, shooting about 40% from 3, even shooting 45% from 3 a couple of times in his career, in Danny Green. And obviously in the small forward position, one of the greatest defenders of all time, one of the best two-way players of all time, one of the most efficient scorers of all time in Kawhi Leonard. And then the power forward spot was interchangeable throughout the year, but they both deserve their own intros. Because at the power forward position, one of the best shot blockers in the NBA throughout the 2010s, finished top 5 in Defensive Player of the Year 3 times in his career, and was one of the power forwards to really pioneer the game today in Serge Ibaka. And then the other power forward being the human Beyblade himself in year 3, who won Most Improved Player this year, and Pascal Siakam. And the center, I already gave this man his flowers. We all know how great Marc Gasol was. But that's just the tippity top of the team. This team goes deep, because at the backup point guard position, being Fred VanVleet, was an undrafted point guard, came up to the G League, and started to prove himself backup point guard throughout the year. Even throughout the playoffs, he started to show his true potential, especially after he got his first child. And even though he was only in year 2, he still showed some great flashes of great defensive potential, and that man being OG Anunoby, and a good spark plug scorer in Norman Powell. This team was deeply filled with scorers and defenders, and a lot of people didn't know how great their season was going to be until it wrapped up. Because by the end of the season, they finished the record of 58-24, being second in the East, being 2 games behind the Bucks. The Raptors that year finished 5th in offensive rating with 113.1, and 5th in defensive rating with 107.1. In the first round of the playoffs, they match up with the 7th seeded Magic, led by Nikola Vucevic and Aaron Gordon. And in Game 1, it wasn't either of them who led the upset against the Toronto Raptors. It was actually DJ Augustine with 25 points in a 101-104 win against the Toronto Raptors. And that would unfortunately be the only time the Magic upset the Raptors for the rest of the series, with the Raptors winning 4 straight games after the fact, and winning that series by an average margin of victory being 14 points. And in the semifinals, to match up with the division rivals, the Trust the Process 76ers, and what a series that was. Personally speaking, I wanted the Sixers to win that series because I was a big Joel Embiid fan at the time, and I thought they also matched up pretty good against the Golden State Warriors. And to remind you guys of the 2019 Sixer team, it was Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. It was just a perfect fit to match up. And in Game 1, wasn't anything crazy, with the Raptors having a lead for the majority of the game and winning that game by 13 points. But in Game 2 is where it starts to get interesting. Because with 2 minutes left, Philly up by 9, Kyle Lowry drains back-to-back threes to make it a 1-possession game, grabs his own board and goes up to make it a 1-point game. And when the Sixers needed a bucket, they gave the ball to Embiid with ease to get an easy layup to put them back up 3. And who would have guessed it, Danny Green missed the open 3 to tie the game. Game 3, on the other hand, was actually really close for the first 3 quarters, but the Sixers went out there in that 4th and put belt to ass, going on a 19-2 run to secure the Game 3 victory to get a 2-1 lead. Game 4, the Raptors were fighting, going down 3-1. The Game 4 was close, but the Raptors had the lead for the majority of the game, so they ended up securing Game 4 to even out the series at 2 apiece. Game 5, one of the most important games in any NBA series. The Raptors made a statement because after only being down 1 at the end of the first, they proceeded to outscore the Sixers 37-17 in the second quarter to secure Game 5 in Toronto. Game 6 obviously now is do or die for the 76ers. They had held their own the entire game, being up 19 points going to the fourth, and the Raptors making a small comeback to drop it down single digits. They still ended up winning that game to force a Game 7. The best 2 words in sports. The stage was set. The Kawhi Leonard led Toronto Raptors against the Jimmy Butler / Joel Embiid led 76ers. And man, this game didn't disappoint. Sixers down by 3, their season on the line. The Sixers find themselves with the ball, and Embiid gets fouled, obviously, and ends up making both free throws. They ended up fouling Kawhi, which we all thought the Raptors were in good hands because Kawhi will make both. And unfortunately, he missed the second free throw. Sixers got a fast break, and Jimmy Butler ties the game. Even though Kawhi missed the free throw, something else a lot better happened.
You got to be aware of the inbounder here if you're Philly.
It's off to Leonard, defended by Simmons. Is this the dagger? Game! Series! Toronto has won!
The first ever game-winning buzzer beater in NBA history to this date. That shot alone cemented Kawhi as a Toronto legend, and also to secure the Raptors spot Eastern Conference Finals against the 1-seeded Milwaukee Bucks, which was no easy task against the league MVP that year. With the Raptors falling down 0-2 against the Bucks, they were backed into a corner. Going into Game 3, they changed their entire defensive scheme, which was to make Giannis a passer and build up a wall every single time he touched the ball. And with having a bunch of lanky defenders, it worked seamlessly, with the Raptors reverse sweeping them, winning the series in 6 games to match up against the greatest team ever assembled in the KD Warriors. But there was a problem. The KD Warriors were playing without KD because KD had gotten an Achilles injury earlier in the playoffs and hasn't played since the second round, so his availability was questionable. As the series begun, Game 1 going to the Raptors by 9 points, and in Game 2, the Warriors didn't want to go down too low. So throughout the whole game, they fought to keep a lead, and with 10 seconds left, they were up by 2 points. With the Raptors trapping Curry and Curry almost losing the ball, who did he give the ball to?
Fate of the universe on the line, or the Martians have the death beam pointed at Earth. You better hit it. I want Iguodala.
Iguodala secured the Game 2 victory for Golden State, winning the game by 5 points. So with that being said, the series is tied 1-1. And after that Game 2, the Raptors switched their entire defensive scheme to what we know as today a box and one. With that newfound defensive scheme, the Raptors ended up winning back-to-back games by double-digit points to put the Warriors in a position they had put countless other victims of their wrath. But once again, Golden State did what Golden State does best, which would be to call out for the Slim Reaper himself to help them out when they needed it. And in this Game 5, Kevin Durant showed why he was the best player on the court. Because in the first 12 minutes he was on the court, he scored 11 points, rattling off 3 straight threes, going 3 for 3 from the 3-point line to give the Golden State Warriors a commanding lead. As we know now, Kevin Durant and the Golden State Warriors' luck would unfortunately come to an end.
Grabbing that right leg. It's the right calf that put him out. And his teammates going over to...
And unfortunately, Kevin Durant had torn his Achilles right when the Warriors needed him the most. But you would think at that point the Warriors would have lost faith. Actually, no, it was the opposite. They kept on fighting, to the point they found themselves down by 6 with 3 minutes left, and the Splash Bros came in knocking, scoring 9 straight points to will the Warriors to win, to force a Game 6. And that Game 6, being in Oracle Arena, everything was in Dub's favor, because Game 6 Clay was in full effect, scoring 30 points in 3 quarters, 10 in just the third quarter alone. Klay Thompson was really feeling it until yet again, everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Thompson running the floor, and a foul. And Thompson grabs his left knee, now writhing in pain. Steph Curry slamming the ball on the court, so upset.
At that moment, the Warriors' spirit left when Klay Thompson went into the locker room. And that injury alone sealed the Warriors' fate. Even with a hard-fought fourth quarter, it wasn't enough, with the Raptors winning Game 6 and the NBA championship, ending their playoff run with a 16-8 record. Now it's time to see which dynasty-killing team would win between the 2019 Toronto Raptors and the 2014 San Antonio Spurs. And to start us off with 4.5 minutes left in Game 1, the Spurs find themselves up by 6 points, and right away Kawhi Leonard tries to make a statement and creates an opportunity to cut the lead down by 4. But later on in this fourth quarter, Danny Green steals it, hitting a timely three-pointer to put the Spurs back up 6 and essentially seal Game 1 for the San Antonio Spurs. Even with the Raptors' valiant effort in this game, the Spurs take it home with a 98-91 Game 1 victory, with the Raptors' leading scorer being Marc Gasol with 16 points and 4 rebounds, Fred VanVleet with 13 points, 3 assists, and Kyle Lowry with 12 points, 8 assists. And on the Spurs side of things, the leading scorer being Kawhi Leonard with 20 points and 10 rebounds, Tony Park 18 points and 6 assists, and Tim Duncan with 18 points, 17 rebounds, and 2 stocks to take a 1-0 series lead. And in Game 2, the Raptors retaliated, being up by 14 points with 3 minutes and 20 to go, and Ibaka just added insult to injury to put them up by 16 to seal the game for the Raptors. The Raptors end up tying the series 1-1 with a 108-94 Game 2 victory over the San Antonio Spurs, with the Raptors' leading scorer being Kawhi Leonard with 25 points and 8 rebounds and 5 assists, Siakam right behind him with 20 points and 8 rebounds, Fred VanVleet with 15 points and 12 assists. And on the Spurs side of things, it was Tony Parker who led the charge with 18 points and 7 assists, Tim Duncan right behind him with 18 points and 12 rebounds, and Boris Diaw with 13 points and 6 rebounds. Game 3, series tied in Toronto. The Raptors find themselves down by 8. And for the next minute of this game, no one proceeded to score, and then a back and forth between Kyle Lowry and Tony Parker. Kawhi Leonard refuses to accept defeat, with hitting a timely three-pointer to put it down by 3 points. Fortunately, they did hit 2 free throws, so now they're down by 5. They hit Kawhi one more time to see if he could steal Game 3 away. He unfortunately missed the three-pointer, and Game 3 went to the Spurs, 96-89, with their leading scorer being Tony Parker with 18 points and 8 assists, Tim Duncan right behind him with 14 points and 16 rebounds, and Patty Mills with 14 points. And on the Raptors side of things, it was Kawhi with 21 and 12, Kyle Lowry with 13 and 5, and Marc Gasol with 4 points and 10 rebounds. Game 4, the Spurs are up 2-1 in the series, and with 4 minutes left, the Spurs find themselves down by 1. After back-to-back easy buckets, the Raptors find themselves up by 5 once again, but Spurs Kawhi doesn't want to lose. And with 15 seconds left, Kawhi hits a timely three-pointer to put them down by 4. With 10 seconds to go now this time, the Spurs give the ball to Kawhi, and he misses it to tie the series at 2 apiece. The Raptors take Game 4 100-104, with the Raptors' leading scorer being Kawhi Leonard with 22 points, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists, Fred VanVleet with 15 points and 3 assists, and Pascal Siakam with 13 points and 7 rebounds. And on the Spurs side of things, it was Kawhi with 20 points and 5 rebounds, Patty Mills with 19 points and 6 assists, and Tim Duncan with 14 points, 10 rebounds, and 5 blocks. Game 5 was a complete domination from start to finish, with the large lead of this game being 42. 4.5 minutes left, the Raptors up by 30 on the San Antonio Spurs. Even with the Spurs trying to make a fake comeback, with a 13-4 run, it was completely and utterly useless. The Raptors end up taking Game 5, 104-82, while leading the charge with 32 points and 6 rebounds and 3 stocks. Marc Gasol with 16 points and 7 rebounds, and Kyle Lowry with 10 points and 12 rebounds. Kawhi Leonard for the Spurs was the leading scorer with 19 and 9. Tim Duncan with another double-double with 16 points and 16 rebounds, and Tony Parker with 11 points and 8 rebounds. Game 6, where the Spurs responded with another belt-to-ass victory, being up by 1.32 points, but with 3 minutes left, they find themselves only up by 25. The Raptors didn't make any fake comebacks though, so the Spurs ended up taking Game 6, 108-87, with their leading scorer being Tim Duncan with 35 and 16. Tony Parker with 17 and 8, and Kawhi with 14, 14, and 4 stocks. On the Raptors side of things, it was Kawhi with 24 and 7, Pascal with 19 and 10, and Norman Powell with 12 points and 3 assists. So now we find ourselves with the best 2 words in sports, a Game 7. 2 legendary teams, one legendary franchise in the San Antonio Spurs, and one legendary storyline in the 2019 Toronto Raptors. Who will take this winner-go-home game? And well, to start off Game 7, this was an unfortunate outcome for a highly anticipated Game 7. Because in this Game 7, the Raptors put belt to ass from quarter 1 to quarter 4. Because with less than 4 minutes left, they're up by 20 points. The Raptors up by 20, and all hope for the Spurs is all gone. And the Raptors take Game 7 in a 112-84 Raptors victory, winning the series 4-3. And the leading scorer was Kawhi Leonard with 38 points, 8 rebounds and 6 assists. Serge Ibaka 14 points and 9 rebounds. Kyle Lowry with 10 points and 13 assists. And on the Spurs side of things, it was absolute stinker. The 41% from the field, 2 of 18 from 3, with the leading scorer being Kawhi Leonard with 14 points and 3 rebounds. Thiago Splitter with 12 points, 10 rebounds, and Tim Duncan with another double-double, 10 points and 10 rebounds. And your finals MVP was Kawhi Leonard from the Toronto Raptors with 25 points, 8 rebounds and 4 assists, shooting 53% from the field, 76% from the free throw line, and 25% from 3. And there you have it. The greatest dynasty-killing team has been the 2019 Toronto Raptors. And that is the end of this what if between the two dynasty killers. And if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment which teams you guys would like me to do this with next. And as always, until next time, go hard on them dudes. Salute.